so excited to share to you today about Yoni Steaming, beautiful ancient practice that has been so supportive for me in the journey from maiden to mother. I just did a Yoni Steam to tune into the energy that I want to come across on this podcast, on this recording. And I think I would like to start a little bit with just a bit of background. What is Yoni Steaming? Where does it come from? And then I can share a little bit more of what it has meant for me and a little bit about the beautiful benefits that go way beyond just the purely physical ones. I think I will just start by saying that it is a very ancient practice, and it has been recorded from all over the world, cultures from all over the world, indigenous cultures that have been doing this. So the practice of Yoni steaming is simply creating some type of steam. Usually when we talk about Yoni steam, it's steam from water infused with herbs, but it can actually also be from smoke. I've never tried this though, so today I'll just speak about Yoni steaming when you use herb infused water. So it's a practice of sitting or squatting or even standing above steam, warm steam, with our yoni, with our vaginas and whole pelvic region that is exposed to the steam. And I recently learned that in Morocco, which is one of my lineages, they still use this practice today, postpartum, where they actually use hot stones and they put herbs, often lemon balm, on top and under the hot stone, and then they pour water over it and they let the new mother, or the nafsa as they call it, stand over the steam that is created. And this is very healing, of course, postpartum. So it has been used in Egypt, in Korea, in South America, different, like all over the world. I don't think I think it's almost every continent that these practices have been practiced in the past or are still practiced today. And there is kind of a revival now of Yoni steaming, which really excites me, because it means that women, also women of the West, are reclaiming their feminine power and wanting to tune into their yoni. And the yoni, also I would like to explain, is a Sanskrit word that means the whole female reproductive system. So it's the vulva, which is the outside of the vagina, it's the vagina, and it's also the whole uterus, the ovarian tubes, and the ovaries, and the cervix, of course. And I was introduced to this practice, I think maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. I think it was by Melissa Sanger, which has been a beautiful mentor of mine, has taught me so much about the womb healing, and has introduced me to the practice of Yoni steaming. And when I first heard about Yoni steaming, I think I was a little intimidated. It felt like quite a big thing to do. And this is such a pity, because also I always share about this practice with my sisters, with my friends, and often they don't try it until I actually like sit them down, make them a Yoni steam, and we do it together, just because it seems a bit complicated if you have never done it before. But I really hope to I wanted to say demystify. That seems a little, that word doesn't seem fit, because I feel it's deeply mystical in a way to engage in Yoni steaming. But I just mean I want to make it more accessible for you. Like, what is it? How do you do it? And so that you will actually try, because oh my goddess, when I first did a Yoni steam, it's like, this song, A Whole New World. You're welcome. Now you'll have this song in your head the whole day. But it's just a whole new world opens up. At least it did for me. It's just so pleasurable when you just squat or sit over a boil of warm herb infused steam. It's the smell, and just my yoni is just so happy and thanking me whenever I do this. And it's of course really beneficial because the heat and the moisture, it stimulates the blood flow of the whole reproductive system. And the herbs also have different powers, different benefits that can really help to keep your vagina healthy, to keep your yoni healthy. It's said to help with things like PMS, it's regulating your cycle, increasing fertility. And of course, postpartum, it can really help with healing the tissue. And you can actually already start a couple of days after you give birth. Your regular health or like health practitioner will probably tell you it's not a good idea, but this is one of these things where we have to trust our ancestors that they knew what they were doing. And, you know, different cultures around the world that some of them had no way of communicating with one another. They came up with this separate from each other just because it's such a logical thing, I think they thought to do. Like, of course you wanna have a wonderful steam bath of your yoni. And here where I'm currently living in Sweden, it's called snip sauna, so they call it like kind of like pussy sauna, which I think is wonderful. And it was also practiced, you know, for a very long time. Yeah, so it's helping with all sorts of reproductive issues. And what I recently learned is that it's not just the heat and the herbs that have the effect, but it's also the like pressure. You know, when you put a pot on the stove and the water starts boiling and the lid starts to, you know, move upwards, it's coming off. It's because the steam creates a pressure upwards, and this pressure on your yoni, it kind of moves everything into place, which is really wonderful postpartum, because your whole, you know, your whole reproductive organs might have moved down. And if you have hemorrhoids, the steam, actually the pressure of the steam can help to kind of gently move everything back into place. So how to do a yoni steam? I really would like you to think of it as something very simple. It's like, if you're not used to making herbal teas, it's like it might feel a little intimidating, but once you get going, it just becomes second nature. And this is the same with yoni steaming. It becomes very easy. You just have to do it the first time, and then you will want to do it again. Trust me, because it's just such a pleasurable, wonderful practice. And so how to do it? You basically need to pick any herb. You probably have something at hand. You can use anything. Like, my favorite herbs to use are mugwort, rose, lavender, horsetail, chamomile, even ringblomma. Now I am only remembering the Swedish name. Calendula is really, really wonderful. There are almost no herbs that I wouldn't recommend. You can almost use anything. The only caution I would say to have is you don't want it to be very drying herbs. Like rosemary, you can definitely use rosemary, but I would always use it in combination with something that is more moisturizing, like maybe oat straw or chamomile, so it balances out a little bit. And so you want to collect your herbs. Also in the Middle East and Northern Africa, they use a lot of cinnamon because it's really warming and antiseptic. And that's a really wonderful one. That's also a bit drying though, so I would always combine it with something that is more moisturizing. Also like calendula is very like softening and moisturizing. Basically anything you have at hand, even if you have no herbs that you consume for tea or specifically for yoni steaming, you probably have something in your backyard, in your garden, like raspberry or nettle even you can use. Red raspberry leaf, which is one of my favorite herbs. Really, really wonderful tonic for the whole female reproductive system and has been such a potent ally for me in pregnancy. During birth, I was consuming it, and postpartum, as well as oat straw. I think those two are my favorites on the maiden to mother journey, which are wonderful for yoni steaming. But even if you don't have a garden, you don't have any herbs at hand, you probably have some cinnamon, you probably have some rosemary, you might have some basil, anything, like almost anything you can use. Just do like a quick Google search and you'll find like which herbs not to use, but you'll find that most herbs are perfectly safe and perfectly fine to use. Especially if you continue to do yoni steaming, you can use different herbs, right? I would never really recommend to use with one herb only. If you're doing a lot of yoni steaming and you only work with one herb, I don't know, it would have to be a very gentle herb, then it would be okay, I guess. But I really love to think about, just as we need to eat a variety of different greens, I like to expose my vaginal microbiome also through yoni steaming to different plants and all the different benefits that each plant carries. This is really where my geeky herbalist side comes up. Let me move on. So you need to gather some herbs, and basically what you do is you warm quite a lot of water in a pot. You heat it up with the herbs inside with a lid on top. Don't let the steam escape. And you don't really have to worry about any proportions, like the more herbs the better, but herbs are also sometimes, pricey, and we need to respect Mother Earth. Like, we don't want to use a kilo of herbs and then just throw them out after yoni steam, because these are all resources from the earth, so keep that in mind. So you don't need a bunch of herbs, but yeah, if it's summer and you have an abundance of, like, let's say horsetail grows here in Sweden in abundance, sure, go ahead. The more the better. So you heat them up. I would bring them to a boil and then turn off the heat. Alternatively, if you're really short on time, you just put the water boiler on, put the herbs in a pot, pour the hot water over, but I wouldn't let the herbs simmer, because then you might lose some of the benefits of the herbs, depending on which. If you're using roots, which I've actually never tried, you might want to simmer them, but I wouldn't do that. So that's interesting. Actually, now I wanna do some research. Can you use roots? Probably you can. Like dandelion, I can imagine would be wonderful. Dandelion roots or burdock, for example. Probably. Okay, moving on. So you have a pot of basically tea, right? An herbal tea. Hot water, herbs are infused. Make sure you keep the lid on top so these beautiful steam with all the benefits doesn't escape. Then you're gonna want to transfer this hot water from one pot to another, because you don't want to burn yourself on the heat of this pot that you heated the herbs in. And this is where I think people feel very intimidated, because there are these beautiful yoni steam stools out there that are just so beautifully handcrafted, but also they cost a lot of money. I've been yoni steaming for 4 or something years. I never had a yoni steam seat. Like, you don't need it. You basically need some type of bowl, just any bowl, just not plastic. So it can be glass, ceramic, or iron. I recently, last summer, I just was so happy when I found this. I found like a Swedish, almost, how do I explain this? Like an old school potty for adults. And it's made from some type of metal. I don't really know what. And but it also has kind of like a layer on top, which makes it not heat up too much. And this probably is not making any sense, but it's very comfortable to sit on, and it's perfect for Yoni steaming. But you just gotta get a little creative. Like, do you have any type of big bowl of glass or clay or whatever? Like, there's so many different things you can use to do Yoni steaming. Just make sure it's not plastic, because you don't want the heat to warm up the plastic and then release toxins into your Yoni, of course. Worst case, you can use a pot, but just make sure you transfer so you don't burn yourself on the pot itself. You put it down on the floor if you're comfortable squatting or sitting over the pot. This is, of course, you have to be cautious because you don't want to be burning yourself. How I did it postpartum, because I had like I really didn't feel like squatting, because that felt like that was gonna put extra pressure on my pelvic floor. My tissue was healing, so I actually just I cleaned my toilet really thoroughly, and then I would put a pot into the toilet. I would clean the toilet, by the way, with a mixture of vinegar, water, and essential oils. You don't want to be like using harsh chemicals and they potentially, going into your Yoni. So I would use a pot, put it in my toilet, and you might have different standards of hygiene. You might find this really disgusting. It's not ideal, let's be honest, but it just makes it very accessible, because then you can just lower the seat and take off your clothes, of course, like from the waist down. You wanna have a towel, big towel or blanket around your waist, and then you just sit down or you squat down over the steam, and you can be creative. Like, you might have a chair in your home where you can take out the seat. That's perfect to use, for example, so you can be more comfortable. Yeah, initially postpartum, I just did it on the toilet because it just made it much more accessible. I could close the door to the bathroom, lock the door, and I could sit. And then you just breathe and you relax and you just feel the wonderful benefits of having warm steam in your whole pelvic region. And one of the healing benefits is, of course, also you're taking time out, you're carving out time to for yourself and for your Yoni and for your healing and for your womb healing. And you can, by the way, stay there for like 15 to 20 minutes. I have done longer, I have done shorter. It's better to do a 5-minute one than to not do one at all. So yeah. Be careful, though, that you're not pregnant. Don't do it while you're actively bleeding. I really like to do one right before my bleed comes on and then after my bleed, or sometimes I will have some spotting. So when I have spotting, I do like to do a Yoni steam, but be careful, because my last bleed, I had some spotting, did a Yoni steam, and then actually it postponed my bleed for a day, so that I was a bit too late with the steaming, and then it can stop the blood flow, so that is really not beneficial. But if you do it not too close, it can really help to bring about the bleed, especially if you use herbs like mugwort is I think it's called amenagog, so it will help with the blood release. And also afterwards it helps to really kind of make sure your whole uterus has cleansed, like everything has come out. And so sometimes weird things may come out. Like when I did Yoni steaming postpartum, even though it was a couple of weeks postpartum, I had this big lump coming out. Because it really like softens all the tissue, and it can kind of like, cleanse and release things from the uterus and the cervix. And during this time when I do a yoni steam, I like to just put on a guided meditation because it helps me to be more present. I often turn to like womb specific meditations, and this inspires me to maybe record a yoni steaming meditation. I might actually already have one. Let me see. I might put a little audio at the end of this episode if I have found that recording that I know I once did. And so you can receive it maybe if you sign up for my email list, something like that. And so then you just sit there 15 to 20 minutes in a beautiful ritual that is connecting you to your body, is connecting you to your yoni, is creating a little time just for you. It feels really pleasurable. It's connecting you back to your pleasure, and it's connecting you most likely to your ancestors because they may have engaged in the same ritual, and they probably have used the same herbs in their lives that you're using in this yoni steam, which I just think is so beautiful about herbalism, like the way it connects us back to our ancestors and also to the lands that we are based in. Like Sweden, it's not my homeland, but the plants that I've been using inside of my body, on my body through yoni steaming, they really help me to build a relationship, not just with my body and the plants, but also to the land, right? And some of the plants also grow in the Netherlands, which is my homeland. So you can play around with the herbs and see what you like. Some things like lavender are really pleasurable, or like can increase the pleasure because it just smells so delicious and has a really beautiful relaxing effect. Or like rose, which is more heart opening, and which I really love to use for yoni steaming as well, because just like the wild roses that have the most potent medicine, as you can see it, those are the ones that only have 5 petals, and I think they're in Sweden, at least, they're usually pink, but I'm not sure if they probably have a variety of colors ranging from white till red. But they're just so soft and wonderful, and they're believed to open the heart. And the womb is in some ancient cultures seen as the second heart because it connects us to our mother and our grandmother and our ancestors. And so rose, I think, is just the petals also remind me of our labia, right? So you can just see what resonates for you, which herbs speak to you, which herbs maybe you already have a relationship with, so your body can recognize the steam and the smell. And I just love herbs. Plants are so fascinating and so wonderful. And what I like to do when I'm done with the steaming, it just feels like you've been rebirthed. Like, it's such a wonderful feeling. I really enjoy to take the water, to take the tea or the herb infused water, and to offer it back to the earth. I used to be able to just go outside and offer it to, usually I would offer it to the elderberry tree that we had in our previous garden. So you give those benefits of the herbs back to the earth, and you ask for the earth to kind of alchemize anything you have released during the yoni steam. And ask, I don't know if this is making any sense of you, this is like the mystical part of yoni steaming, and the rituals around it that I like to do, or I like to engage in. I believe that the earth can both benefit from the herbs and from this energy you're giving to her, as well as the ritual of giving that back to the earth can help it to alchemize the old that you have released into the steam, to be alchemized and to for something beautiful to grow from there, which is also the life cycles, right, of the earth and of the female body. We go through ebbs and flows through our menstrual cycles, and the same with birthing. Like, we go through a big death and there's a release, and then there's a kind of empty void, and from there, plants and seeds can be planted and beautiful new things can be created. And I just thought it was wonderful to see both where I had offered my menstrual blood into the garden, as well as these Yoni steam baths, to see then what was growing there, and how my connection to this land and to the garden and to nature and to these herbs would deepen. I just found that really, really beautiful, and still do. I'm talking in past tense because we recently moved into a temporary apartment, and so here I don't really feel free to go down and offer. I just don't have the same privacy. But I still like to think that whether I let this water run down the sink or down the toilet, that it is, it's like a little prayer of how I like to see it. It's like a little prayer that's infusing the the water pipes and wherever it is going, and just these herbs and my blood and my perhaps things from my womb is like an infusion of the feminine that is so needed in our world today. Wow, that was a big sidetrack. Just thinking if there's anything else that wants to be said regarding Yoni steaming. Yes. I highly, highly recommend you doing this with a sister. It is so bonding, and it's just so wonderful to see my dear friends, like, their faces as they realize, wow, this is what I've been missing out on my whole life. Just wonderful, wonderful. And I find that the conversations that we have while we steam together are just so deep and so important. Like, our energy is sucked down into our body and into our feminine being, into the uterus, into the yoni, into our source of feminine power and wisdom. And from there, we can just hold space and listen and share in a whole different way that has been so deeply healing for me. Yeah, I think this is it. Just, I really encourage you to not make it too difficult, to just find a bowl, heat some water, dump some herbs in there. Yes, you can make rituals out of it, but you don't have to make it into a big thing at all. One little side ritual I want to mention is when you're, of course, heating up, like you're brewing the herbs, you can, of course, pray and with intentions whisper perhaps to the water, like, what's your intention? Do you want to invite more ease into your life? Do you want to invite more pleasure? Would you like to release? Would you like to integrate part of your birth story, for example? Would you like to invite more intimacy with either sisters or a partner? This is an invitation for true presence and for healing. And there's one more thing I really wanted to mention, is that also in some cultures they use Yoni steaming during labor, because it really helps to soften and open the cervix. So it can really help with progressing labor. I haven't personally tried this myself, but I might engage in this if I am ever pregnant again and gonna give birth, because for me, there's almost nothing else like a Yoni steam that helps me to come back to my body and just activate my parasympathetic nervous system, like activate my relaxation response. So I'm really curious to try this out during a next potential birth. Just really, of course, you shouldn't, for the same reason, do this during while you're pregnant, of course. For the same reason as it can kind of create this opening downwards energy and might stimulate your baby to want to be born. So we don't want that. So you gotta wait until you're actually like, I think it's like 39 weeks pregnant, then you could start. I personally really trust that the baby knows when he or she wants to come. So I wouldn't really engage in much of the things that we could do to bring about labor, just because I would normally, unless there's a special situation, but I would normally trust the timing of the baby. And so I wouldn't start Yoni steaming until you are actually in labor. And then it can be like a nice little extra support that helps you to relax. And also it kind of creates this bubble, right? Because you have this towel around you and the steam is only on your bubble. So it might help you to really create a little protective bubble for yourself. I am really excited to bring Yoni steaming more into postpartum. Because I just see it as a really, really powerful, easy tool. It doesn't require a lot, and the benefits are really amazing. I also want to share that I have been having irregular cycles for most of my life, menstrual cycles, and now that I got my bleed back, I'm still breastfeeding my toddler, my 2-year-old. And my cycle postpartum has also been, I think I got my bleed maybe 9 months after giving birth. And then my cycle was irregular, and I, for the first time, really started to be consistent in Yoni steaming at least once before my bleed and at least once after my bleed. And since I've been doing this consistently, my cycle has drastically improved from being really long into like, it's still a little bit long. It might be like 35 days. But for me, that is a lot better than it used to be. So I'm seeing really a lot of benefits from what I believe to be the Yoni steaming. That it's really supportive for my menstrual cycle and regulating my cycle. Okay. I think I will leave it at that. I really would love to hear your questions. If you have questions about Yoni steaming, just send me an email. I'm still figuring out what to do with Instagram, but I think I would like to stay away largely or maybe altogether from Instagram, so it'd be better to email me, and I will provide an email in the description of this podcast. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And I wish you all the pleasure and all the joy and all the embodiment and just, pleasure. I think there's no better word for it. Pleasure in your Yoni steams that hopefully are to come after you've listened to this. And if you enjoyed this podcast, it would mean a lot if you would share it with a sister and rate and review so we can share this really ancient wisdom. I lastly want to just add one important thing that I forgot to mention, which is a beautiful trial study called the 4-trimester vaginal steam study that really shows some of the amazing benefits of Yoni steaming postpartum. So I'm just going to read this. I will link it down below also, like the link to this article that I'm reading for more information about this trial study on vaginal steaming. Let me just read what it says here. For centuries, women across the globe have used vaginal steaming to assist with postpartum recovery. This practice is experiencing a resurgence in popularity in the US, but obstetricians and gynecologists remain largely unfamiliar with the practice and are unequipped to provide informed advice to their patients on its safety and efficacy. For this reason, clinical studies on vaginal steaming are in high demand. The following study was designed to provide a foundational exploration of the impact of vaginal steaming on postpartum recovery. So, before I continue reading about the results, I just want to say that they had two groups, unfortunately very small groups. One trial group that was steamed first already 4 days postpartum for a couple of days, and then they had a control group that was not steamed. And there were 6 women in the trial group that were steamed. It's kind of weird to say were steamed, but they had a practitioner come to their place and help them and guide them in doing the steam. So, this initial study found that postpartum steaming was useful for more speedily returning the vulva back to its pre-pregnancy state, expelling lochia, postpartum discharge, more quickly, reducing the strength and occurrence of postpartum contractions, lowering blood pressure and pulse, helping the uterus to shrink back down below the pelvic bone in a shorter amount of time, accelerating waist and weight reduction, alleviating suture discomfort such as itchiness, tightness, pulling, or tenderness, improving bowel regularity, and lowering the incidence of postpartum hemorrhoids. Wow, amazing, right? So I'm going to refer you to the link and just read about it. And there's some beautiful podcasts about this study as well. And very, very lastly, I want to mention that I have found a Yoni meditation, which is a practice I recorded a while back, a long time ago, but I think it's still relevant and nice to use. So you can find that in the description of this podcast. You can find a link to my Substack where I've uploaded it as a audio file. So I think this is a wonderful meditation you can do anytime, but also it could be definitely used for Yoni steaming if you just I sometimes need some guidance of a meditation to actually sink that awareness even more into my body. So you can find that down below. Please consider subscribing to my Substack because I am no longer on Instagram and I really want to use Substack instead. So you can support this podcast by subscribing to that Substack, and then you will also get an email when new podcasts are uploaded, or when I write a blog post, because I also do love to write and want to get back to that. Okay, thank you so much for listening and enjoy your Yoni steaming.